it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day, and today we are in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And that wasn't the Liberty Bell you just heard ringing, but the replacement bell that's up in the bell tower there. If you look across the street, that's where the Liberty Bell is housed in that little bit of a visitor center. And we're here at Independence Hall to talk about books related to two of the most incredible documents that were signed here, the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. Sound exciting?
Yes.
All right, let's walk this way, Kathy, because I put my box over there on the bench, but I wanted to start with this beautiful statue of the signer. Which documents? I don't know. Could be the Declaration, could be the Constitution, but pretty exciting nonetheless. And we're going to begin with a book that is related to the Declaration and one that was specifically related to Thomas Jefferson. It's one of the most important works of political philosophy ever written.
Wow.
And that is The Social Contract by Rousseau. Now, Rousseau doesn't get enough credit as an influence on the Founding Fathers, in my opinion. When we talk about republicanism with a small r, a lot of times we're talking about English philosophers, we're talking about people like John Locke, or maybe even the Scottish Enlightenment. But Rousseau was very important to Thomas Jefferson specifically. And Jefferson was perhaps the most radical of the Founding Fathers in that he believed in the concept of the social contract, which basically said and was embodied in the Declaration of Independence that if your leaders don't behave, the people is where the power resides, and the people have the right to overthrow them. So this came into the shop just this past week, and Kathy, it's incredible. It really is a first edition of the social contract. You'll note right away it was published in Amsterdam, or supposedly published in Amsterdam. That could be a false imprint, but this was from 1762. Now, when this book came out, it was illegal to own it in France. They burned it in Geneva, which is where Rousseau was from. And so there was some mystery as to where it was published. And the reason it was illegal was because it was just so radical, because it denied the sort of inherent rights of kings, and it put the power in the hands of the vox populi, the people. And there you can see the scales of justice and the liberty pole and all that good imagery. Here's an interesting publishing fact. Soon after it came out, there started to be counterfeit copies of the social contract that said they were published in Philadelphia. But in fact, they weren't. They were also published somewhere in Europe. And that was because even at the time, Rousseau's radical ideas were associated with those Americans. The social contract would eventually be taken up by the French revolutionaries, people like Robespierre. They took it to the ultimate level, but Jefferson embodied its fundamental values, core values, the rights of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the concept of equality. All of these issues really come out of the social contract, Rousseau's great book. And as you see, it was published originally in 1762, not too long before the Declaration was written. And this is what the Founding Fathers were reading. This is what they were debating. This is what they were discussing. But not many of them agreed with Jefferson. Most of the other founders believed that people were ruled by their passions and their interests, not so much that they couldn't necessarily be educated. And all the concepts of sort of populace that was able to rule itself, really we owe a lot to Jefferson and his influence by Rousseau. So a pretty exciting book. That was signed here, the Declaration of Independence, back in 1776. But what's also remarkable about the building behind us, and let's turn, Kathy, because there's Independence Hall, wow, is that this is, so this was not only the site of the Continental Congress, but it was also where the delegates gathered for the first federal convention. And it is where the Constitution was drafted and debated. And that brings us to our second book, which is in some ways even more remarkable than the first book, because it was a book that was owned by one of the men who was drafting and writing the Constitution, not just read, but actually owned. And it's an equally remarkable book, and it is a book which we don't often associate with the Founding Fathers, and that is, it is a copy of Sir Thomas More's Utopia, which was translated into English and published in Glasgow in 1743. and was obviously written many years before. Thomas More famously stood up to Henry VIII, lost his head over it, and wrote this book, Utopia, about a world in which, well, advising kings would have been meaningful. But one of the themes in Utopia is that it's a waste of time to try and advise kings, because that's certainly what Thomas More thought. Utopia itself was a term that was coined by More, and it referred to a place somewhere in the Americas, and it was an island. But what I want to draw your attention to, Kathy, is look where the book came out of. It came out of New Jersey College. That's the first thing I saw when I bought it. New Jersey College being Princeton University. You can see up in the front, it's had some restoration done to it. There's something there about irony and maybe some original notes. But there it says College of Princeton as well. And this would have been a course book back in the 1760s, at the same time that the founders were sort of beginning their studies. And if you turn not from the title page, but you go past the preface and you go here, you can see whose book it was.
Wow.
And it was owned by William Patterson. And we know by the date, January 3rd of 1762, that that was when he was a student at Princeton. And borrowed this book and obviously wrote in the book and then kept the book for some time. And now it's important because William Patterson came here to the Constitutional Convention in 1787 representing the state of New Jersey, and he ran up against James Madison, who was representing the state of Virginia for the most part, and Thomas Jefferson was nowhere to be found. Why? Because he was in France with all the rest of the radicals. But he wrote Madison a few times and tried to get him to be even more radical with regard to these proposals for the Constitution. Madison was a very practical person. But Madison believed that the Constitution should be based upon population. It should be basically the larger state should have more power, right? And that was called the Virginia Plan. And Patterson, however, said, no, being from New Jersey, a smaller state, he believed in the New Jersey Plan, which was that it should basically be the ideal state is a small state and that all states should be equally represented. And that, Kathy, is a concept that comes from Utopia, Thomas More's Utopia, because Utopia is an island, it is a small state, it is a city-state in some respects, like Geneva, where Rousseau was from, and it is a place where you could almost have this type of direct democracy in which the people ruled because it was not too large. And I think that's fascinating, and people will now need to study the connections between this historical work and the Founding Fathers even more. Eventually, there's something called the Connecticut Compromise. We were just up in Connecticut for a book sale, and we end up having the sort of hybrid system that we have today. But William Patterson, the leading proponent for New Jersey and the New Jersey Plan. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
All right, I offered this book, by the way, to William Patterson University in New Jersey. And did I even get an email back from them? No, I got nothing back from them, but I think it belongs in their library. And if anyone has any connections with William Patterson University, they really ought to have a copy of this book. Well, those are our stories of the Founding Fathers. Again, Rousseau not recognized, really. Thomas More not recognized. It shows the ideological and intellectual influences of the Founding Fathers, I think, in a whole new way. And there are two books that, this one we discovered in a bookstore in New York State, and the other one I picked up at auction. And they are both now in the Midtown Scholars Collectible Building, so come on and check them out. Are we ready for a funny book?
Yes.
Yes, I think we are. I think we're in favor of one for not only Easter, but for the spring. And I've chosen one that represents the little critters that we see hopping all around us right now. Yes, Kathy? Do you know what it is? It's Funny Bunnies. And it's so cute for Easter. Now, this is a book which is just filled with all of your favorite bunnies. There are fantastic ones like Bruce, not the funniest name, and Twiggy, but I think in honor of what we did today, we have to go straight to Mr. Jefferson. There he is, weighing 6 to 9 pounds, Jefferson, and look at those ears. Wow. Well, that's our funny book for Easter in the spring. I hope you'll watch next Friday and every Friday at noon right here on Buy Day Friday for more adventures in the world of books.